Have you ever sat by your window, a warm cup of tea in hand, and quietly asked yourself, when did the way they look at me start to change? Maybe it was subtle at first, a forgotten birthday call, a sigh when you asked for help, a coldness behind their words that didn't used to be there. It creeps in slowly. At first, you tell yourself they're just busy. Then you start questioning whether you've become too much, too needy, or too emotional. And before long, love the kind that once felt unconditional starts to feel like something you must earn back. But let's pause for a moment here. Let's gently breathe into a truth that many people over 60 rarely say out loud. Sometimes the children we raised with everything we had grow into adults who forget what we gave. Or worse, they begin to test the boundaries of our love, assuming it will stretch infinitely without question. And as parents, especially as aging parents, we carry this enormous weight of guilt because we think love should mean never saying no, never pushing back, never drawing a line. But the hard, freeing truth is this: even love has limits. No matter how deeply you love your children, there are lines they must never cross. Lines that protect your dignity, your peace, and your self-worth. Because love is not license. It does not give permission to disrespect, to disregard, or to deplete. Let me share a story with you. There's a woman named Teresa. She's 74, widowed, and a mother of 3. All her life, she put her children first, packed lunches, stayed up with fevers, worked overtime, missed vacations, all so they could feel safe and supported. She was proud to do it. But after retirement, something shifted. Her middle son began calling only when he needed money. Her daughter visited only when she wanted help watching the grandchildren. And when Teresa said she couldn't help once, just once her daughter didn't speak to her for 3 months, Teresa sat in her small living room during that silence, replaying every moment of her motherhood, wondering where she went wrong. But here's what she realized. She didn't go wrong. She simply never taught them where her boundary was. She loved them so fully for so long that they forgot she was a person with limits. This brings us to the first unshakable line. Disrespect even from your own child should never be normalized. You may think they're just stressed or they didn't mean it, but if the tone, the words, or the attitude belittles you, especially repeatedly, it chips away at your spirit. And over time, it becomes your new normal. But respect is not a favor. It is a basic right. You are not less deserving of kindness because you are older. You are not here to be anyone's emotional punching bag, not even your child's. And the moment we accept disrespect as part of the relationship we teach them, it's okay to treat us that way. Now, the second line is equally vital: guilt-driven giving. Maybe you found yourself handing over money you couldn't spare, or saying yes to things that drain you because you're afraid of being left out or unloved. That fear that if you don't give, they'll pull away is one of the most painful traps a parent can fall into. It comes from love, yes, but it also comes from fear of abandonment. And that fear is powerful. It makes you give, even when it hurts. But I want you to ask yourself this: if love disappears the moment you stop giving, was it love to begin with? You are not an ATM. You are not a convenience. You are a human being with value even when you say no. Then there's the third line, and this one often hides in plain sight: dismissal of your emotions. Have you ever expressed sadness or disappointment only to be met with, "You're overreacting," or "Don't be so sensitive"? That subtle erosion of your voice can make you feel invisible. You start bottling things up, avoiding conflict, tiptoeing through conversations just to keep the peace. But peace at the cost of your voice isn't peace, it's silence. And silence becomes loneliness. Your emotions are not burdens. They are signals of your inner world. You have the right to express them and to be heard without mockery or minimization. If your child brushes off your pain as irrelevant or dramatic, that is not your failure, it is theirs. And it is not something you have to quietly swallow. I know this isn't easy to hear. It goes against every instinct you've built as a parent. We're taught to protect, to nurture, to forgive endlessly. But aging doesn't mean fading, and loving your children doesn't mean abandoning yourself. You've lived too long, survived too much, and loved too deeply to be treated as less than. You still matter. Your voice matters. Your needs, your time, your boundaries, they all matter. And while you cannot control how your adult children behave, you can decide what you will and will not tolerate. That too is an act of love, not just for them, but for yourself. Because when you begin to stand in quiet strength, when you start to honor your worth, you show them a new kind of love. One that doesn't come from fear, one that doesn't plead for affection, one that says, I am still here, I am still whole, and I deserve to be treated with care. That's not rebellion, that's self-respect. And the most remarkable thing is when you hold your boundaries with grace, not with anger, but with steadiness. Something begins to shift, even if they resist. At first, your children begin to sense the change. They begin to realize this parent, this person I took for granted, they're not bending anymore. They're standing. And when you stand the world, your world begins to realign around that strength. Sometimes when we've been saying yes for decades, saying no can feel like betrayal. But more often than not, what we call betrayal is actually a boundary, one long overdue. We're so conditioned to associate love with self-sacrifice that we forget something essential. Love without boundaries is not sustainable. It becomes obligation, not connection. Helen, a viewer who once wrote to me, shared her story of raising 2 boys on her own after her husband passed. She never remarried. My life, she said, was about them. She worked nights, skipped meals, and did without so they could have everything. And as they grew into men, Helen quietly expected that one day that same depth of care might come back to her. Not in grand gestures, but in respect, in thoughtfulness, in presence. But instead, one son began dropping off his children for hours without notice, treating Helen as a free babysitter. The other barely called, and when he did, it was often to borrow money. When Helen tried to talk to them about how she felt, one of them responded sharply, "Mom, don't be so dramatic. We have our own lives now." Those words stung. But more than the words, it was the message underneath them that hurt. You don't count anymore. That is a message no parent should have to swallow. Helen started to realize that her love had become so expected, so automatic, that it was no longer seen as a gift, but as a given. This brings us to another line that must never be crossed being used. There's a difference between supporting and being used. One comes from mutual care, the other from imbalance. When you are always giving and rarely receiving, when your time, your space, and your presence are treated as tools of convenience, that is not love. That is entitlement. And yet this is one of the hardest patterns to break because it disguises itself as service, as kindness, as the role of good parent. But being a good parent does not mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean saying yes just to keep the peace. It means modeling healthy love that respects both giver and receiver. Helen made a quiet decision that changed her life. She began to say things like, "I'm not available that day and I'd love to help, but not without notice." At first, her sons resisted. They guilted her. They called her cold. But something else started happening too. They called more. They asked rather than assumed. They saw her for the first time in years as a person, with a life, not just a mother, to lean on. Respect isn't demanded. It's inspired by the way we carry ourselves, by the way we quietly reclaim our space. That leads us to yet another boundary: emotional dumping. You've likely had moments where a grown child comes over or calls not to talk with you, but to talk at you. They vent, complain, unload every frustration, and then hang up without asking how you're doing. You're left carrying their storm while your own silence grows heavier. You are not a dumping ground. You're not a therapist. You're not their crisis sponge. Now, of course, we want our children to come to us when life is hard. That's love. That's trust. But when they make a habit of treating you as an emotional outlet without offering any care in return, that is not a healthy relationship. It's a draining one. And over time, it leaves you feeling powerless, unseen, and emotionally exhausted. What would it look like to say gently but firmly, "I want to be here for you, but not at the cost of my own peace"? That sentence spoken with love changes the dynamic. It reminds your child that while your love is vast, it is not without limit. There's a quiet dignity in knowing when enough is enough. And here's another difficult but vital line controlling your choices. Sometimes our adult children believe that age means they know better. They question our spending, our decisions, our relationships, our routines. Why are you wasting money on that? You shouldn't be driving alone. Why are you still living in that house? Their concern may come wrapped in care, but sometimes underneath it, there's a need to control, to shrink your independence, to make your life conform to their vision of safety or convenience. But you are not a child. You are not incompetent because you are older. You are still the keeper of your own life. If you allow your adult children to make you feel incapable, if you surrender your autonomy out of fear of their disapproval, you slowly become a shadow of the person you once were. And that is not the way aging was meant to be. Aging is not decline, it is refinement. It is wisdom shaped into grace. So the next time someone tries to override your voice, I hope you remember this simple truth. You have earned the right to make your own choices. Not just because you're an adult, but because you've lived long enough to know what matters to you. There's one more thing I need to say, something that may sit heavy in the heart but must be spoken. Love is not owed. You gave them life, yes. You gave them love, time, care, sacrifice. But none of that guarantees that your child will always love you the way you deserve to be loved. That's the truth we so often hide from. And in trying to chase their love, trying to buy it, fix it, please it, we forget the one love we should never abandon: our love for ourselves. Because when you treat yourself with honor, when you hold your lines not with rage but with resolve, something begins to soften. Maybe not in them, not immediately, but inside you. A quiet knowing returns, a sense of strength you thought had slipped away. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to beg to be seen. You only need to stand calmly in your worth, and that calmness becomes your power. When the shift begins, it's almost invisible at first, not because others notice, but because you begin to notice yourself again. There's a quiet morning when you make your tea and realize you're not holding your breath waiting for a phone call. There's a moment when you say no without guilt, and nothing crashes. These moments are small on the surface, but they are sacred, because they are the signs of someone who is no longer chasing approval, no longer bargaining for love. That's when the healing begins. I remember Frank retired widowed and living just outside Tucson. He told me how after his wife passed, his 2 adult children became distant. Not cruel, not cold, just absent. Months would go by with barely a text. When they did call, it was quick, distracted, businesslike. "You doing okay, Dad?" "All right, just checking. Gotta go." Frank's voice cracked when he described those calls. They weren't even conversations, he said. They were drive-bys, just enough to clear their conscience. For a while, he responded by giving more. He mailed them gift cards for no reason, sent money when they didn't ask, tried to sweeten the pot, as he put it. But nothing changed. In fact, the more he gave, the less they showed up. And then something in him broke, not out of anger, but clarity. He told me I realized I was showing up for people who weren't showing up for me. And worse, I was shrinking myself to stay lovable in their eyes. That was the day Frank changed his life. He stopped calling them every Sunday. He stopped waiting for birthdays to matter, and instead he started calling an old friend from the military. He began volunteering once a week at the local dog shelter. He joined a senior poetry circle, said he hadn't written since high school, but thought it might be fun. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly. His children started calling again, not out of obligation, but curiosity. "What have you been up to, Dad? You sound different." And he was. You see, the moment we stop orbiting around our children's mood schedules or needs is the moment we come back to ourselves. It's not about pushing them away. It's about reclaiming our center so that if they come back, they find us whole. There is nothing more magnetic than self-respect, Not resentment, not anger, just quiet, unwavering self-regard. That's what Frank embodied. And without raising his voice or laying down ultimatums, he began teaching his children how to treat him, not through punishment, but presence. And that brings me to another sacred line, your peace. No one, not even those you love the most, has the right to disturb your peace as a habit. Every time someone walks into your life with chaos and leaves you carrying it, that's not just rude, it's harmful. Peace is not selfish. It is your birthright. It is the ground you stand on, and it is your responsibility to protect it. When someone speaks to you with sarcasm, criticism, or condescension, even your children, it's okay to say, "I don't deserve to be spoken to that way." Not with fire, not with fury, just with firmness. Because when you protect your peace, you teach people where the line is. It's not easy, especially when you're not used to it. You might second-guess yourself. You might hear the echo of old thoughts whispering, "But I'm the parent. I should be the bigger person." But there is nothing small about protecting your dignity. There's power in silence when a conversation turns toxic. Power in walking away from drama without slamming doors. Power in choosing your own energy over someone else's storm. And perhaps the most essential line of all, the one most often crossed and least often named, is this: your right to joy. After a lifetime of caregiving, planning, sacrificing, showing up, you have the right to joy. Not borrowed joy, not quiet moments in between errands, but deep, uninterrupted, chosen joy. You have the right to decorate your home in whatever makes you smile, to spend your afternoons in the garden at a museum, watching old films, learning something new, not because it's productive, but because it delights you. Sometimes our children want us to live a certain way, to stay available, to stay modest, to stay predictable, but your life is yours. It is not a stage for someone else's comfort. It is your canvas, and you are still the artist. When you stop apologizing for your needs, your time, your dreams, something extraordinary happens. They notice. Your children may not say it, but they feel it. Your boundaries become their roadmap. Your dignity becomes their mirror. Your joy becomes the proof that love doesn't mean shrinking, it means standing tall with a soft heart. So if they cross a line, let your response not be anger, but clarity. Let your stillness be stronger than their noise. Let your grace be your boundary. And above all, let your love for yourself be louder than your fear of losing theirs. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes when you stop chasing love, it finds its way back. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally remembered you were worthy of it all along. If you're still with me now, I just want to say something simple and true. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to face this conversation, for sitting with emotions that many people your age are told to hide or suppress, for letting yourself feel not just the hurt, but the hope too. It takes real strength to admit when boundaries have been crossed by those you love the most, especially when those people are your children. There's no pain quite like it, not because they meant harm, but because you gave them everything. And still, sometimes they forget who you are, not just as a parent, but as a person. And yet, here you are. Not bitter, not broken, just ready to remember your worth again. That's what this video has been about. Not anger, not blame, but remembrance. The quiet rediscovery of your value, the gentle return to your own center, the refusal to abandon yourself even when others do. And I want to tell you something from the deepest part of my heart. You don't have to earn your right to be respected. You don't have to prove your wisdom or your kindness or your sacrifices. You already have. The fact that you showed up, gave love, endured the hard years, stayed present, that speaks louder than any apology or explanation ever could. From this day forward, I hope you begin to see every boundary you set not as a wall, but as a doorway. A way for you to step more fully into the life that's still waiting for you. A life where love is mutual, not one-sided. Where care is exchanged, not extracted. Where joy is chosen, not delayed. And if that relationship with your children is hurting right now, I want to remind you, you can love someone deeply and still not let them cross lines that hurt you. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. It never did. So tell me, what lines have you drawn for yourself lately? What boundary have you set that brought peace instead of guilt? Or maybe you're still figuring it out. That's okay too. You're not behind. You're just becoming. If anything in this video resonated with you, if even one sentence felt like it reached the part of you that's been holding on quietly, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share your story, or just share a word. This space is for you, and I promise to read every single reply. And if this conversation made you feel a little less alone, I hope you'll stay with us. Click that subscribe button. We have more conversations like this, conversations that matter, that honor your journey, that speak to the truth of what it means to grow older with grace, power, and self-respect. Because your story isn't over, not by a long shot. In fact, this may just be the chapter where you stop walking on eggshells and start walking in light. You deserve peace, you deserve space, and you deserve to be surrounded by people, yes, even your children, who see you, hear you, and treat you with the love you've always given so freely. So here's to you, to the strength it takes to stop chasing, to the power of standing still and being seen anyway. Take care, my friend. You are not alone. You never were.